So we are moving into chapter 5, and chapter 5 is focused on polynomials. So instead of talking about things that are just linear, meaning the first degree, instead of talking about things that are quadratics or parabolas, now we're going to look at things that have higher exponents and can have a variety of features. So first we're going to talk about what a polynomial is and what it isn't, and some key features of polynomials in this video. So for a polynomial, in order to be a polynomial, you're going to have terms. Those terms can have numbers, they can have addition and subtraction, they can have variables to different powers. So you can have something like x squared plus 5x plus 3. That's a polynomial. Polynomials cannot have, I'm just going to make kind of a list off to the side, you will never have any variables in the denominator for a polynomial. So this is not a polynomial. You will not have any radicals. That is not considered a polynomial. That's called a radical function. You will not have any exponents that are negative. So you will not have something like a -2 exponent. You will also not have anything that has a fraction exponent. So you're going to be working with variables that will either have no exponent at all, just like x to the first, or you'll be working with things that are x squared or x cubed. You can have any sort of number in front of them, fractions, decimals, positives, and negatives, but the actual variable is kind of limited in what it can have. When we look at this, we have terms. Terms in a polynomial are separated by addition or subtraction signs. And each term, we can kind of describe the term based on the variable that's there and the exponent that's there. So for this first one, that first term is called the cubic term because it has a third power. The second term is called the quadratic term because it has the x squared. The third term is called the linear term because it is just an x. And then your last term, any term that does not have a variable, is referred to as your constant term. So some definitions that you should know. The degree of the polynomial is the highest exponent that is there. So the one that I just wrote, we would say it is degree 3. We always write the degree as a number. So you'll say the degree is 1 or 2 or 3. The leading coefficient is the coefficient of the very first term once it's in standard form. So it is the first coefficient as long as it is in standard form, which we're going to discuss next. So it's the coefficient that's going to go with the highest power of the variable. Standard form means that your powers need to go from highest to lowest. We say that they are in decreasing order, meaning the highest exponent needs to come first, and then the next one, and the next one. And you can skip. There might be a situation where you don't have any x squareds, so you're going to skip that and go down to x to the first. But it needs to be from highest exponent of x to lowest exponent of x in order to be in standard form. We can classify polynomials by different names depending on the degree, depending on the number of terms. So this table kind of takes you through all the different classifications that are out there. We're going to start by talking about the degree. So if it is a 0 degree, basically if it's a 0 degree, it's something like y equals 5. It doesn't have any variable at all with the x's. This is called a constant polynomial. We can classify it as a constant. If the degree is 1, meaning it has an x to the first power, so it's like 5x minus 4, we call that a linear polynomial. And the word linear means line. It means if I had to graph this, it would be a line. If it has a second degree, so if it's something like 3x squared, so we have an x squared in it, what we spent all of last chapter studying, this is called a quadratic polynomial. And these all form parabolas. They look like this. If it has a third power, a third degree, so if it was something like x cubed plus 2, that third degree, that highest power, makes it be classified as a cubic. Cubics look like this. They kind of go down on one end and up on the other, or vice versa. If it is a fourth degree, so I'm just going to keep it real simple and just call it negative x to the fourth. This is called a quartic. QUAR is usually the prefix you see for things with 4, like quarters in a football game or a basketball game. Quarters that you spend money on, 4 quarters in a dollar. Quartics actually look a lot like parabolas. They have like a lot of this kind of look. They might just have more stuff going on in the middle. And then if it is a fifth degree, so like x to the fifth plus 7, this is called a quintic. Quintic look a lot like cubic functions. So when you're asked to classify a polynomial, there's two ways to classify it. One is going to be by the degree. So one of these 6 names you can use for every polynomial that we look at. There are some names for higher degrees than 5, but this is really where I want you to focus on. The other way we can classify a polynomial is by how many terms it has. Every number of terms gets a different name. If it only has one term, so if it's just like y equals 2x, we call that a monomial. This would be an example of a monomial. This would be an example of a monomial. This one down here would be an example of monomial because it only has one term. If it has 2 terms, we call it a binomial. The prefix bi meaning 2. Actually, all the other ones that I haven't circled are binomials. If it has 3 terms, we call it a trinomial. I didn't write any trinomials, but it would be something like x to the third plus 5x minus 7, something like that with 3 terms. Anything beyond that, once we get past 3 terms, we stop using special names and we just say that it's a polynomial of that many terms. So a polynomial of 4 terms, a polynomial of 5 terms, and so on and so on. We stop with the special names after 3 terms. So every polynomial can be classified both with the degree, so that's one of the terms in this column, and with the number of terms, so one of the names in this column. So we're going to go through just a couple of them just to kind of make sure you're comfortable where we're going to do all of these things. So standard form, you want to make sure that it's already in your highest exponent first. So this is going to be, and you can write y equals or f of x equals. Your first term is going to be negative 2x squared. The sign that's in front of it sticks with it. Your next term will be the x term, so 3x, and your last term will be the 10. Your degree is the highest exponent. It is degree 2. That comes from this right here. My leading coefficient is going to be the number that is in front of that, or how many of that term we have. So that is negative 2. I do want to mention on Delta Math, it asks about the leading term. If it asks for the leading term, so your leading term, it's the entire thing, the negative 2x squared. If they only want the leading coefficient, they only ask for the very first number. And then the type, so this is degree 2, so we would call it a quadratic. It's going to look like a parabola. And it has 3 terms, so we're going to call it a trinomial. Next one, going to standard form, the highest exponent is the 4th, so we're going to have pi x to the 4th come first. And then we have an x to the 3rd, so we're going to do minus 14x third. And then we have a minus root 2x squared, and then plus 7.4x. So going in order from the highest exponent of x down to the lowest. There is no constant term on this one. This one is degree 4 because the highest exponent is 4. The leading coefficient is pi. If it would have asked for leading term, it would be the whole pi x to the 4th. The type, since it's a degree 4, we would call it a quartic. And since it has 4 terms, we would call it a polynomial of 4 terms. So that is a basic description of all the terminology we'll use to describe polynomials. If it's not a polynomial, you can't find these things. So if you're given a question on Delta Math and you look at it and say, well, that's not even a polynomial, then you're going to say it's not a polynomial and you're going to move on. If it is a polynomial, it'll often ask you more questions.